Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Bricks King podcast, where I'm going to bend your ear about Lego, review those amazing bricks of plastic, and discuss what is new and up and coming around the Lego world. I'm your minifig host, Matt. Let's build on it. Welcome in, everybody. How are you doing today? Hopefully you're doing quite well. We have a Lego Masters recap show. I know you're like, oh my goodness, another. Yes, we've got another. So I'm not going to waste any time, humdrum in your ear and all that kind of stuff. Let's get into it. Lego Masters Season 4, Episode 5 for the United States. They had Cirque du Soleil kind of act that they were trying to accomplish. So they had to have 4 different features in a build, and we'll talk about this. Contortionist, flying, balancing, and high wire. So the thing that they needed to do, they were grouped as teams. So it was 4 and 4, and it was team against team. Now, each partner pair had a corner of the build that they had to contribute to this group build. So one group would have contortionist, one flying, one balancing, one high wire. So Sam and Nina, they were the contortionist act. I love their build. It was really cool. They had a bunch of brick built figures bent in different positions, and they were spinning around, almost like, honestly, it looked like grain flowing in the wind. It was exquisitely done. Amy had commented on that she loved the motion, the movement of it. But the idea that they incorporated motor movement into it and things were just spinning was really nice. It turned out really, really well. So Poppy and Ben were in this group as well with Sam and Nina. They were a balancing act. And it was Ben that was doing it because Poppy was, I think he was sick, or he was under the weather, not under the weather. Anyway, so he was alone. He did a brick built fig atop a crescent moon. It was exquisite. It was absolutely gorgeous. I loved the way that it was done. There were synchronized swimmers in the water below. And it was just a really fun idea. And the execution, oh my God, it was darn good. The execution of this was exquisite. A dude working by himself, a young college kid working by himself. He just nailed it. There was no other way to really, he hit exactly what the judges were looking for. And the story that it fell into was absolutely perfect. So Lewis and Alex were also part of this group, and they had the high wire act. There were 2 brick-built characters attached to one another, one on the moon and one on the sun, and they attached via a Technic brick-built beam. What they did is they took a bunch of, I don't even know if it was Technic, I can't even fully recall, but they made this brick-built beam, plates and such, and compressed them and made it sturdy. And these characters, these figures, would glide across it. It was gorgeous. It was one on top and one on the bottom, and they would just glide across it. So the gliding was done by a motor moving one end of the beam up and down. Now, one of the really cool things was that when you were going through the process of watching the show and watching all these different builds and stuff like that, what they really showed was how they were in the beginning stages of how they were going to get this movement to go up and down. And I can't remember whether it was Lewis or Alex. I think it was Lewis. And he was lifting it up and down just to get the idea of, okay, this is how this is going to work. And it was great. It really turned out really well. So in the rear of the build, they had this spinning round black background, and it was filled with all kinds of different colored bricks and pieces of different kinds and shapes and stuff like that. And it was supposed to be the Big Bang. It was great. Honestly, it had to have been the most ambitious build on the show, without a doubt. It was so cool to see. Jamie was gushing over this build. Jamie was like the little schoolgirl, like, oh, like he was beyond excited. So Christopher and Robert were the last group in this pairing of teams. They had the flying act. They had sun and moon builds that spin. Their moon was really cool. Their sun was really cool. Just, compacted plates and bricks and stuff like that. They had a brick-built human. Well, they had brick-built human characters in general that were interlocked and spinning with the same movement as the moon and the sun. It was so cool looking. And what I loved about the sun and the moon is they had trans colors of their build. Like the moon, it was like a few different colors of blue, shades of blue. And they had all these little trans colors and stuff like that. Like it caught the light of the studio really well, of the set. It was really, really neat. So then we move on to the second group of people. Allison and Melanie, they had the balancing act. They had two mermaids that were rotating underwater in unison. That was really cool. I was a big fan of that one. And I just realized I forgot to give the premise of this. So the premise is it is a female human, a little girl that was walking, wanted to be a mermaid, and it was her transition through the process. Because you have to tell a story. Like Cirque du Soleil is not just, people doing high wire acts and stuff. There's a story that is associated with it. So they had the balancing act, like I said, and the two mermaids were rotating underwater in unison. And I guess they were the end, but the new human to mermaid transformation that wasn't at the end, but she got her flipper, right? That's where she finally, and their builds were really, really sharp. Their little mermaid builds were really done nicely. Just really, really cool. So Paul and Nelita were in this group, of course. They had the high wire act. This is where it started. This was the beginning of the build. They had a human brick-built figure walking across a high wire, obviously, above the sea with movement back and forth with the water below. And you had some mermaids. Well, you had a mermaid that was built down in the water, which it wasn't like brick-built water. Like it had a backdrop. But it was really neat, the movement that they had. And the judges I think it was Amy that commented on it. And just the way it went, and you kind of felt the dramatic idea behind it and stuff. It was really, really sharp. So Emily and Kelly did the flying act. They had a trapeze into the sea. The movement is a girl dropping backward like a trust fall, if you know what that is, and then lifting again over and over. So the movement was she's falling into the ocean, and then as the motor and gears and whatever other thing that they had flip back around, she would kind of pivot upright again. So that was the movement. They also had really nice movement on the seafloor with another mermaid, and this one was moving, which is nice. It wasn't a solid built thing where it was just stationary. That was I was a big fan of that. And then we move on to the last one. We move on to Aubrey and Ryan, and they had the contortionist act. And this was the culmination of this transition from human to mermaid. So they had this new brick-built mermaid that was atop the underwater build, and it was rotating back and forth on this pedestal, right? Like it's like if you think like a king on his throne and then all his people down below. That is kind of what it is. So the other mermaids were on the seafloor, and they were rotating as well. Of course, so many mermaids and stuff were rotating and swaying and all that kind of stuff. But the greatest thing is that they got all the sea grasses and all the kind of vegetation underwater. All of that was moving up and down. It wasn't just the rotating of mermaids. It was, and then the mermaid flipping back and forth. It was all of these little pieces moving up and down. It captured the eye so stinking well. And the funny thing is, I shouldn't say the funny thing, Amy was enamored by the build overall. She was just, wow, But the contorting mermaid was by far her moment that she loved the most, she had mentioned. And I agree. I thought it was really well done. So then we get to the end here. I have some complaints here. Okay. I know I guess this falls under reality television or whatever, game show. But the thing is, nobody went home. This was one of those episodes where everybody stays, you can't get rid of everybody right away. You've got to continue to do like hey, we need more episodes, right? We can't just be done. But my God, can we stop the cheesy endings? For real? It was so fake. Amy and Jamie, it was so poorly executed. Like Jamie's what he was saying was just, it was so non-believable. It was just really, really bad. There was something about it where I just sat here and I shook my head and I was like, this is dumb. What are y'all doing? Anybody can read through this and they're kind of like, yeah, this is kind of ridiculous and silly and whatever. And then the other thing is, so then they had to choose, right? And the production company is playing this up. You've got the judges that are like, man, they step back into like this slightly darkened area, just behind where Will, the host, is standing. And, they're going back and forth, like talking, and it's not real talk. You can tell it's absolutely fake nothingness. And then they come forward out of the darkness into the light. And then they're going to say, our best build with the pairings for the overall mega build of these teams was a tie. Seriously, come on. That's where I lost it. I was like, I'm done. This is dumb. You don't have an elimination. Fine. But please stop with that. There was no bottom two and there was no top two. But Aubrey and Ryan had the best build without a doubt. They had the best build. They were nominated. They were crowned best build for this challenge. And they actually got tickets for Cirque du Soleil in Vegas, which, if you have not seen, it's an amazing show. My wife and I went to Vegas probably 3 years ago. We went to watch my favorite comedian, Daniel Tosh. I know. You're like, really? Yeah. That's the kind of humor I have. Anyway, so we went there and we saw that, and we also saw Cirque, which was incredible. So we had no basement dweller changes this week because nobody was a basement dweller, but we do have updated power rankings, and I want to get to those. Power rankings are, something where you're kind of like, really? This is where we're going with this? Yeah, kind of, sort of. So on last week's episode, our power rankings were kind of, simple, right? Lewis and Alex were at the top. We already knew that, but let's go ahead and we'll start at the bottom again. So our power rankings for this week, we have Emily and Kelly. They are still sitting firmly down there in the 8th position out of the 8 teams. Their builds were nice. I don't think they really elevated anything. Then I have Allison and Melanie. And the reason I have Allison and Melanie at 7 with their fall 2 spots from number 5 is just because their build with who is moved above them. And you have to remember, this is a whole body of work. This isn't just a single episode. But this episode definitely plays heavily into it. So they dropped because a few others moved up. Aubrey and Ryan moved up from 7 because they won a challenge. They moved up to 6. You're like, wait, what? You also have to remember they were basement dwellers. Okay. I think it was the week before. So it's like, okay, we're going to pump the brakes here. They're not moving super, super high. But Paul and Nalita moved up. They moved up 1 spot to number 5. And that is what I was saying. So Allison and Melanie fell behind those two. Why? Aubrey and Ryan essentially won this challenge, whatever you want to call it, best build. Paul and Nalita's build was much stronger than Allison and Melanie's, so they deserve to be up there. So number 4 is Poppy and Ben. That has not changed. Sam and Nina are still number 3. That nothing has changed there. Christopher and Robert, number 2, and Lewis and Alex, number 1. Now, the thing is, there's not a whole lot of change here, just due to the sheer fact that you only have so much that can be done on a non-elimination episode. Nobody was in the bottom 2 because there was no bottom. Nobody was in the top 2 because there was not a top 2. Nobody went home. Nobody had like a super stressful moment. And that's the funny thing. Like, usually if there is a team that might be on the dock for elimination, all of those film segments go into that episode. Where Tim and Tim were having troubles before they went home. I can't remember who went home before them, but I think it was maybe Amy and Karen. I can't remember if that was their name or not, But you kind of see that, and it's like, okay, I know who's struggling and who's going to be in the bottom two more than likely. Anyway, so that's what it is. So that's where we are with power rankings. Next week's episode, which is coming here in a few days, it is a 1x1 build for items that is in Will's makeshift office type thing. I love 1-to-1 builds. Our lug does them from time to time. I think people come up with some really cool things as far as techniques to be able to get certain 1-to-1 ratios. Some of the things that they have to build where they showed them preview for 1-to-1, I'm like, okay, the telescope looks pretty banging, dude. Like, give me that thing. I am hands down all in for that one. I think it's great. That would be something that I would love. Like if it were a Lego Idea set or it was a creator, I guess it would be icons. An icon set, something like that more of it doesn't have to be 100% 1-to-1, but that would be something like a 1-to-2 scale build. I would be all over that. Anyway, so that is the wrap for Lego Masters Season 4, Episode 5. Episode 6 is coming. There is an elimination, I can tell you that. There is a guest star who is Stacy, who was crowned the winner for last season. The winner for last season. I'll leave it at that. So until we meet again, I'm your minifig host, Matt. Let's build on it.